As the person in the program that primarily uses the How Do I Say curriculum, I'm in more of a position to talk about this material and how we use it. So that's what I'm going to do here for the next half hour. Back in 2013, winter 2013, the first time I met Aine, the first time I came to a Indigenous Language Institute training in Tucson, was the first time that I heard about the How Do I Say curriculum, which at that time was not even in existence, not even published. But as participants, we all received a flyer announcing or publicizing its impending release, publication, and I returned to South Dakota with the flyer, very, very excited about a resource that would be a good roadmap for how to carry out a master apprentice teaching learning situation. And one of the things that we hear a lot among people who are interested in learning the language, people who don't speak the language but wish they spoke the language or want to learn the language, is people say, we have a lot of sentences that start with if only I had the time, if only I had the resources, if only I had more of an ear for language. But one common one is if only I had a speaker to hang out with, or if only I lived with a speaker, or if only I had regular access to a speaker, I think I could really learn the language fast. And while that's, and it makes sense as a line of thinking, and certainly having access to fluent speakers is better than not. But I think people also overestimate the idea that all you need is the speaker and the learner and a room together to talk, and fluency and language transmission will sort of magically take place, and fluency will, happen over a fairly short period of time. And what those of us who have learned the language in particular, and also worked at teaching the language, come to realize very quickly is that it's not that simple, and that just having the teacher and the learner together without any kind of roadmap, without any kind of framework for how to get to point A, introducing the basics of the language, to point Z, being fluency, that there are many, many pitfalls along the way, and that relationship needs as much support and needs as much of a framework as a classroom teaching situation in a lot of ways. Otherwise, I think it can be very common to have a good couple of days and then kind of run out of things to talk about, or English kind of takes over as a crutch and torpedoes the language relationship, or you start getting into more complicated aspects of the language, and a fluent speaker doesn't necessarily have the vocabulary or the knowledge of the language's structure to help a learner work through that. So it really is a lot more complicated than it appears on the face of it. And prior to How Do I Say being available, there really wasn't much that we had been able to find in terms of how to make that kind of relationship work, how to make it efficient, how to make it successful, how to make it sequential. And so discovering this curriculum and getting our hands on an advanced copy, thank you again, which we were an early reviewer of in return for the advanced copy, coincided very well with us launching our Second Language Learner Initiative, wherein, so we have an immersion school, we have 20 kids, I should say immersion preschool. If you were here 2 days ago, we introduced it, but basically we have kids from 18 months through nearly 5 years old. We have a mixture of first language speakers, second language speakers, and intensive second language learners. And we instituted, starting about a year ago, a second language learner program, which is full-time. We currently have 3 people working for us through this program. They work in the daycare full-time. They use the language to the children to the extent of their proficiency, which increases over time. And every day, we have intensive second language learner teaching and learning sessions for their benefit, of which, how do I say, is one of the core components of that. The second language learner program, unlike the number of kids we have, isn't limited by an ideal number. With the kids, we're trying to maintain a good ratio between teacher and student. We have limitations based on the size of our building, based on what is allowable for our state daycare certification. But I always say, in terms of the second language learners, we could fill the building cheek to jowl with people who want to learn the Lakota language and are looking for a more successful way to do it. The problem is that we really feel we need those people full time. That if we're going to get people to fluency in a year or two, it has to be, we have to have them, we want to have them 7 days a week. We want to have them full time. We want to have them in our situation full time. And that doesn't allow them to have another full-time job and also have a family, which pretty much everyone does. And so the only way for them to actually, support their family and have a living wage is if they actually work for us. And so we are limited by our ability to pay our learners essentially to learn Lakota. But to the few people we have, it's a pretty good deal, So I'm going to talk about how we specifically use the How Do I Say curriculum. And I should say, too, that this is, we use a particular, we take the basic existence of the book, which is very open-ended in a good way. Again, it's got a circular table of contents. There's a lot of ways you can go with it. And we, hang on here. There we go. And we kind of add on a number of methods that we feel really maximizes the use of the materials for our program, for our learners. I should say at the outset, programs that do Master Apprentice that deal with tribal elders, it's generally very important to not place too heavy of a burden on the fluent speaker, right? The idea is that they're the language expert. They're not necessarily someone who has an extensive background in, language teaching pedagogy. And it really falls to the learners to do 90% of the work in terms of guiding the master-apprentice relationship based on their own needs, based on their own learning progress. What we do is a little more of a 50-50 sharing of responsibilities between the teacher and learner. So it does put somewhat more of an onus, particularly in terms of debriefing, on the teacher. And we'll get more into that in a minute. So first of all, though, the dialogues come with a preparation period. And the dialogue that we're going to look at specifically with our program is the dialogue on page 32 of your binders, which you don't have to look at, but you can kind of follow along if you want. And this is the dialogue on pets. What pets do you have? What animals do you have at home? Whether that's household pets or horses, cattle, sheep. What animals do you have around you? So when we did this topic, like all topics, we made sure that the students had a day in advance to do it. And if you're just going through the binder in order, it doesn't have to be necessarily explicitly stated. They just always prepare one a day. If you're skipping around or if it's more democratic, between the teacher and learners, which topic they want to do next. They just need to be aware that that's going to be the topic you're going to do the next day. We have our fluent speakers on site, our first language speakers. But prior to that, the students prepare introductions to the dialogue, basically a 1 to 2 paragraph long, 2 to 5 minute long topic introduction, where they will talk about the pets they have at home in this topic and say a little about them and maybe what their names are, and basically use the suggested bulleted points there on the page in the binder. So initially they do this themselves. They use their own knowledge. They use the Lakota dictionary, whatever resources they have at their disposal, to try to do it on their own, without going to the speakers first, as a way of practicing where they are in their proficiency and kind of identifying the gaps in their knowledge. Then when they go to the native speakers and say, here's what I've got, can you look over it? Can you listen to me do it? They can get feedback on their pronunciation, how they put a sentence together. Maybe there's issues with the grammar. Maybe the way that they're saying something is coming from a context of English language knowledge, but isn't coming from a Lakota, a Lakota thought origin. And so then the fluent speakers will help them get their opening remarks more fine-tuned. But because they've done it on their own first, it can help them kind of flag their own errors that they made and have those in mind. Instead of having someone really walk them through it holding their hand, they can say, okay, I thought you would say it like this. Now I see that you would say it like this. And that kind of exposes to them maybe a misconception they had about Lakota grammar or Lakota thought processes. So then once they've prepared that, we have the dialogue session. And I'm going to play a recording of this for you in a minute. How do I say is part of a larger set of language practice activities. We try to have kind of a freewheeling dialogue when we go into the room that we use for the sessions. The goal is to have no English used during the session at all. And we also record the sessions on the computer. An example of another activity that we commonly do is there's a book which some of you may have seen before. It's called Action English Pictures, and it's actually designed for students learning English as a second language, but it's useful for people learning any language. And it's basically a book full of panel cartoons, anywhere from maybe 10 to 20 panels long, without any word balloons or captions, where you see people carrying out daily activities over the course of the cartoon strip. And there's various ways that you can use those to help the speakers talk about what's going on in those cartoons, or they can talk about it in the first person as if they were the main character of the cartoon. So that's another thing we do. But we record the How Do I Say sessions in particular. The students go first. They take turns reading their introductions to their topics, again, talking about their pets. Especially early on in their learning, we don't dock them points, for reading off the page. For most of them, speaking for a few minutes in the language or reading a paragraph's worth of text in the language is more Lakota than they've ever, spoken at one time. Following that, the teacher then gives their own topic introduction. And once all have given their topic introductions, the teacher attempts to keep the conversation going as well as possible. Once everyone's talked about their pets, let's try to elaborate on that. What else can we say about our pets? Can we say more? And especially early on, these can kind of seem like the weakest part of the the conversation. The learners have kind of used up all that they have to talk about in their introduction, and before they get to a more, at least an intermediate level of proficiency, they can kind of run out of things to talk about or kind of flounder in that, and that's fine. They get better at that as they go on. So this this dialogue that I'm going to play for you is one of our earliest. It's actually I think our 4th ever session that we did. And so I'll have you listen to that. I'm just going to play the introductory parts, and then we'll go over how we debrief this and how we use the recordings, because that's kind of the most work we do above and beyond what the binder recommends.
Igmu wamakashka mitchawaki lena, igmu mitchawaki igmu na tigris ewe chakyapi. Igmu ki glaja zisha na tigris igmu glaja ia checha. Vitkotko kapi lena ki igmu ohiele eyash itchunkala o oyuspe shicha. Itchunkala gmunke Unkiapi yuhashka.
Aha, mashte. Crazy nishe hantuelo.
Shunkla kan wichi saki buati. Shunka waka hena mitawashni. Hena lester waters tawapi. Shungleshka ki hena iota na washte walake.
Oha, unkish tiata shunka numna shunka wakhanum wichin happy. Na shunka wahanons waffles and sparky ewichak yapi. Sparky li la lechala unkichupi. Mithawi chuki tiata agalina tawa unyapi. Ona ha waffles ish wanalila treha doki wanietu ikjemana unyuhapi. Na shunkawa kao hanons wanji tratezi etja na omaki fry bread etja. Fry bread hiikjeka hecha na tratezi ish hizi hecha.
So anyway, and that guy goes on for a little while longer. So anyway, that was me playing the role of the facilitator in that session, and 2 of our second language learners did their topic introductions first. So if you were a fluent Lakota speaker in the room, you would probably recognize that that the learners got quite a bit correct in terms of pronunciation and grammar. There were definitely some missteps in there. And even though they had prepped first with the native speakers, that doesn't mean they're necessarily going to remember all of the pronunciation issues that they needed to. And there may have been issues in their grammar that they may have not gotten a chance to fix, or they may have added on something between their tutoring session with the speakers and their main session. So one thing that's important to us is debriefing, is not just kind of leaving it on the table and saying, okay, tomorrow we'll do the next topic and we'll leave it there. So this is where it becomes more of my own responsibility as the facilitator in this session. So I listened to the audio recording. I listened to it several times over. The first time I transcribed the dialogue, meaning that I actually take everything that you just listened to and type it out into a document. I go through the audio again to make note of pronunciation and grammar issues, make note of those issues along with corrections, and then send out that document, the document that has the transcript and the edits to the students. And this is all, the whole situation is very positive. The learners want to learn. They're not, none of the corrections are, to make them feel bad, and they get that. They want the critique. They want to be constantly improving in their speech, in their pronunciation, in their grammar, particularly because a large chunk of their day is being with the kids. And they want to, be a genuine help to the daycare and have the kids hear good, high quality Lakota coming out of their mouths, as well as the first language speakers. I also share the recording of the dialogue, what you just heard, as a file through Dropbox. And if I have time, which about more than half the time I will, record another audio file, which is kind of the audio version of the debriefing document, where I go over the pronunciation issues and the grammar issues out loud. So I will show you. And so I don't know how well you can read that. Well, obviously, if you're not versed in reading Lakota, not very well. But I just mean kind of the words on the page. So this is, without worrying about the ins and outs of it, this is the full transcript of that dialogue. You'll see occasional English words in there, which refer to the names of the pets. Amber has a cat called Tigress, and I have a horse named Frybread, and dogs named Waffles and Sparky. And it didn't take all that long. This was transcribing about maybe 3 or 4 minutes total of speech. I also will translate them. The translation in this case is more important for what I said. And in this case, actually, I've only translated what I said. That's because that way when they go over and either read the transcription or listen to the audio, because I'm talking at a higher proficiency than where they are at the time, they can follow along with what I was saying and how I said it, and use that as kind of a model. I also note that I said something ungrammatical in there. When I listened to it, I was like, did I say that? I used the wrong form. I said tawa uyampi. I should have said tawa ungich iapi. I know all of you, I know, right? Crazy, I made that mistake. So, but I will, as necessary, as the teacher, police myself on that. And then you've got the pronunciation notes. So we had 2 learners, Amber and Gracie. A here is for Amber. G is for Gracie. And so that's a second, just a copy paste of her transcription, just so she can have it for reference. And the notes on pronunciation. Wamakashka, the word for animal needs more of a guttural K. Wamakashka. She said ewechakiapi, should have been ewichakiapi. That's just a vowel issue. She said galeja instead of galeza, which has 2 issues: the accent on the word and the z, the z sound instead of the j sound, and so on and so forth. With the grammar notes, they're usually a little more extensive. And I actually include for each of them a fixed grammatical version where I go through and say, so here's everything with the grammar cleaned up, and this is what it would have sounded like in that case. This takes me at least an hour a day to prepare these debriefing. Why do we do it this way? It's really important for us that the second language learner sessions, the how do I say sessions, not be too caught up in pronunciation and grammar and not include English in them. However, from a larger perspective, good pronunciation, good grammar, good Lakota are important to their development as learners. But a lot of that they can do on their own. They can learn on their own. And particularly with the audio, in some ways they're not on their own because they're hearing themselves, they're hearing the teacher. And that way we can maintain That way we can maintain the integrity of the all Lakota environment, but also give them kind of a metacognitive teaching after the fact. So then their homework for the next day is, as soon as they get this, and I'm going to wrap up here with my final 2 slides. So their student responsibilities are as follows. Just to review, they prepare the dialogue intro, they come to the session ready to go, they don't use English during the second language learner sessions, they try to contribute to the conversation continuation beyond the intro as well as they can. And once they get the dialogue transcript and the edits and the audios, they listen to them as soon as possible while it's still fresh in their memory. And they practice, practice, practice in order to be constantly improving. And so there's quite a bit on them. The teacher doesn't have too much to do beforehand. Assign the conversational topics, stay in Lakota during the sessions, make sure the sessions are recorded, that the audio is good. We do get a lot of extraneous noise because we're in a daycare. We try to do it when the kids are napping, but we have 20 kids, you know, they don't all nap at the same time. Contribute own conversational intro. I usually try to not prepare ahead of time so I can talk off the cuff as much as possible so it doesn't sound like I'm reading off a script, but it sounds like I'm talking about things off the top of my head, which I am. Attempt to guide continuing conversation and create the debriefing document and share the document and audios as soon as possible after the session. So, in closing, this is a particular method of using the how do I say that we developed for our own program. Depending on your resources, particularly depending on who your teacher or facilitator is and what they're willing to do, how proficiency they are with technology, reading and writing the language, etc. You know, it would be something for you to decide if that is, you know, a model that you would follow or maybe take some ideas from. But it's worked for us, and it's really helped our learners progress. So I don't know if there's time for questions, or I got the high sign a few minutes ago. So I will be around. Matt will be back after lunch. If you have any questions you want to ask us in person, we can do the Q&A there. So, wo pilai chichi apalo. Thank you.